So Eileen is a founding participant in the campaign, and her thinking and organising and creative spirit has been critical to getting us all together in this launch tonight. Over to you, Eileen.
Hi, everybody. I'm speaking to you from the lands of the Kaurna people here in Adelaide. Well, here we are, folks. 2.2 million people receiving the coronavirus supplement just had their income slashed by $300 per fortnight come September. That includes 1.6 million unemployed and single parents, students, and young people. And then up to 3.5 million people on JobKeeper, many of whom won't get their jobs back in a hurry, if ever, slowly having their income slashed to a maximum of $1,000 per fortnight for full-timers and $650 for casuals in January. And then all the people who are living on savings, super, and charity, who missed out on any support at all, including many, many casual workers, recent migrants, international students and asylum seekers, and a massively increased hidden unemployed, up to 700,000 of the so-called discouraged workforce who are not looking for work because there is no work available. Add to that all the people languishing around or well below the poverty line on the age pension and the disability support and carers pension who receive no supplement at all, and the scale of the crisis that we're facing begins to take shape. And then you can throw in for good measure all the workers whose jobs over the last decade have been casualised or made part-time, many workers thrown on the scrap heap during the demise of the manufacturing industry, people in the so-called gig economy, and even those regarded as sole traders, who are in reality just workers who no longer have a secure place in the labour force. Add that all up, and what we're contending with is a crisis of the capitalist economy not seen since the 1930s and the Great Depression. To be clear, none of this was entirely unforeseen, nor is it a result of the COVID-19 medical situation alone. This crisis was coming at us before COVID, and in fact, it could be said that there's been no actual recovery in the global or the Australian real economy, the one that we all live in, since the GFC of 2008. Simultaneously, across all the so-called liberal democracies, we've experienced a major crisis in the political system and the political class itself, with levels of distrust and hostility rightly at unprecedented levels among the general public. You'll note, though, that in the midst of this dismal forecast for ordinary people, some are doing just fine, thanks. Just the other day, I read how the sales of luxury cars are booming, and the stock markets and currency traders, give or take a few sacrificial lambs, are still bouncing those trillions around the globe and making considerable financial gains. Prior to this March, many activists and community organisations have fought for years to lift the abysmal New Start payment, not raised for 26 years, and all the other payments and services which support so many people disregarded because they aren't seen as directly feeding the profit-based system. The human toll of this meant thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in a state of bare existence, skipping meals, living in substandard housing or homeless, detrimental effects on our physical and mental health, and the pervading sense that we were discarded on a scrap heap, not of our own making. And I want to pay tribute to some of those groups now. The anti-poverty networks of South Australia and Queensland, and I just want to give a shout out to all my compadres of Anti-Poverty Network SA who are having a live launch gathering over there at Hope's Cafe in Adelaide. The Fair Go for pensioner groups around the country, the National Council of Single Mothers and their Children, the Australian Unemployed Workers Union, stalwarts in representing the rights of unemployed workers, the Tomorrow Movement, campaigning for social and economic justice for young people, the Say No 7 and No Cashless Debit Card Australia, who fought for years against the barbarism of forced income management, the Not My Debt group, who've valiantly fought the appalling robo-debts which led so many to take their lives, which are arising like zombies from their own supposed graves at the moment. The migrant groups who organise relentlessly for their communities, the disability activists fighting for the rights of the disabled and their carers, the public housing and renters' rights groups around the country, particularly in Victoria. The list goes on. For a long time, we had few friends. Some staunch NGOs and church groups, some sympathetic journalists and academics, and some from the social service and health services who saw the destruction on a daily basis in their work. Even shifting the brutal narratives about dole bludgers, burdens to the taxpayer, and surplus to requirements, cold economic commentary took years of persistent and rigorous pushback. And even now, these narratives lie in wait, ready to be utilised by this government and their media lackeys. But into the fray has come the grassroots unionists, individuals, branches, and regional and city trades and labour councils who represent mostly low-income workers, just that bit above the poor on the economic ladder. And with them, they've brought the serious issues of underpayment, assaults on the awards system, wage theft, casualisation, and the biggest question of them all, just where are the jobs going to come from in the future? These are people who know that Solidarity Forever is not just a song you sing once a year while you manoeuvre to get yourself or your faction bumped into Parliament. They and we all know it's all the same struggle. We are all part of the working class, whether we can physically work or not. And together we won't stop till everyone in this country has a dignified standard of living. This array of groups and individuals in essence forms the backbone of the Living Incomes for Everyone campaign. And we aim to keep building until the vast majority of ordinary people resident in this country join us in a movement that really can change the nature of things. We've only been organising for 6 weeks, but the momentum is growing rapidly, with nearly 70 organisations now endorsing our demands and more coming in every day. And our demands are threefold. But first, it's very important to say that we completely reject the government's cuts to people's incomes announced today. There's no social, economic, nor moral justification for it, except that it keeps filtering wealth from the poor to the rich. And we'll be refining our responses to this latest attack in coming days. So, to our demands. We demand that the current job seeker rate, including the coronavirus supplement, be kept as a minimum of $550 a week. Here we have something tangible at last to defend, and it's no king's ransom. It doesn't even take unemployment benefits in this country to the average benefits across the OECD. It still leaves people in hardship, and it isn't the last word from us on what is really required to live a life. We also demand that JobKeeper be retained at its current rate until such time as people no longer need it, and that it must be extended to all those who missed out. But crucially, we also insist that it needs to be given directly to workers rather than allow employers to rort it as they have, and as many are threatening to do, sack workers while they recover because they don't want to pay for entitlements JobKeeper doesn't cover. Our second raft of demands is no one left behind. So we demand that all other payments, the age pension, the disability support pension and carers, austerity, and all the youth allowances and parenting payments to be raised to $550 per week as a beginning. We won't tolerate the divide and rule tactics of this or any other government, or those of the policy wonks who spend sleepless nights trying to work out how to give crumbs to Paul and take away from Paula. We will counter this divisiveness strongly, whoever is implementing it, including among our own ranks, where sometimes people get snagged in a sense of scarcity and fight for the crumbs with others who have little. We demand free childcare, recognising the disproportionate burden of raising children on women, and a massive increase in public housing to ensure everyone has a home they can afford, as well as providing an infrastructure project that will create jobs. And crucially, we demand a significant increase to the minimum wage, which lies at the guts of all government and business attacks on wages. Lastly, but not least, we demand an end to the punitive nature of the social security system, so-called mutual obligations, making people jump through hoops for their measly living and punishing them when they can't meet the impossible and irrational tasks set for them. We need to dismantle the privatized multi-billion-dollar job provider industry who have inordinate power over people's lives. The constant threat of forcing you into compulsory income management, all the work for the dole programs. So many of these programs trialed in blatantly racist manners in Aboriginal communities before being rolled out to everyone else. We need to put the employment sector, services sector, firmly back in the hands of government, but a government that in turn is under the control of the people, away with all punitive measures. We know what its function is. If you can punish and dehumanize people at the bottom of the economic heap, you provide a deterrent for workers not to get above their stations and demand better wages and conditions. You can force people into shit jobs, low paid and onerous, and expect them to cop it sweet. Finally, people ask, what is the difference between L.I.F.E and all the other campaigns and positions around raising the rate and so forth? And here's our view. We recognise the need for advocacy, but we're not primarily advocates. The advocacy and lobbying model hasn't got us very far. Over the many decades, it's been viewed as the only way to change government policy. We don't intend to become yet another institution speaking up to the powers that be. We're speaking around and across to our own people. We're building a movement. We believe that impoverished and low-income people are more than able to build our own campaign. In fact, we think that's the only way we'll ever achieve our rights and our dignity. Our movement will grow well beyond this immediate crisis until we build a society and an economy that has human need, not the greed of a few, as its foundation. We have big plans through our composite groups for a week of actions starting September 18th, when the government will begin implementing their plan for us. And I hope that you'll join us in this and the Living Incomes for Everyone campaign in the coming weeks, months, and years. Thanks, everyone.